Welcome to today's webinar presented by Docupace. We're excited to host this special discussion on surveillance. Here are a few important items before we get started. Today's discussion is being recorded and a replay will be available on the Docupace website following today's call. All audience members have been muted and video turned off. If you would like to ask a question for one of our speakers, please use the Q&A button located on your screen. To begin today's discussion, please welcome our host, Senior Vice President of Business Solutions, Matt Paulsen. Matt, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, Kristen. Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon to you all, depending on where you are. We're excited to continue the Docupace webinar series today, and I'm particularly thrilled to be here with our guest, Robert, or we call him Bob, McGill. This installment is focused on the industry topic and kind of need of surveillance compliance. Now, as is tradition with these webinars and our series here, Ryan George typically starts off with a quote. I have a quote for us today. And it's by the infamous or famous anonymous chief compliance officer, of course, but it goes, wealth management firms that do no surveillance or inadequate surveillance are like someone floating in a barrel with no paddle in the middle of the river headed for Niagara Falls. Now, we know that firms, there are probably no firms that do no surveillance, but it's still a good quote, I think, anyway. Although, and I also love our marketing's effort here as well. They always do such a great job, but I love the tagline, if you've got broken tools, you may have broken some rules. And that's kind of the backdrop for today. We know there are a lot of solutions out there to help with surveillance, but Bob and I today are going to explore key elements to consider when looking at providers and their solutions, while highlighting, obviously, some key differentiators that that you may not know about today that we do here at Docupace, and how the Docupace surveillance solution really changes the game. So I'd like to have Bob McGill introduce himself. I know I wouldn't do him justice, but Bob is also humble, so I do reserve the right to embellish where he left something out or minimize something for himself. But Bob, go ahead.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Matt. I am Bob McGill. As Matt said, I'm one of the newer employees here at Docupace. I came to Docupace from a company called Giacomo that was acquired by Docupace in May of 2021. My current role is to lead the innovation efforts and the product building and designing in compensation and compliance. So compliance contains trade surveillance, and it's one of the areas that we focus on. It's one of the most popular applications that our clients use us for. So it's basically my focus, and I'm pleased to talk to you all about it today.
Great, Bob. Thank you. Kristen, if you would, go to the next slide, and I want to start with kind of a primer. And I think it's important to highlight a quick history of Docupace and how we got to where we are today, and especially and particularly for this discussion. So just as a little history, Docupace is a premier provider in the space, and we continue to grow. The genesis really was compliance and simplifying complex processes through automation. The first solution that Docupace created was a document management and storage solution. And in the broker-dealer space, from day one, it was 17A3 and 17A4 compliant, and today obviously meets the regulatory requirements for the SEC, for RIAs, etc. We continue to evolve, and there wasn't really much evolution that needed to happen there. They're very similar, but we have certainly made sure that we do that. We can see a sample of some of our clients here on the screen. We're proud to partner with so many fantastic brands. We feel like we push them to improve, and they certainly push us. And as a result of meeting those needs for them, we've evolved our platform. Over time, what we call the Docupace platform evolved into a true straight-through processing, universal new account opening, document management and storage solution, purpose-built for the industry. Go ahead, Kristen. And I just want to show kind of, a little bit of our solution set here. So with that background, I want to just highlight that in the middle, you see kind of the dark blue circles. Those are our solutions. In the middle is just what we talked about with our new account opening platform. We've evolved into a transition, an advisor transition solution as well, doing bulk movement of accounts over. Also highlighting that we have a compliance tracker that's a Reg BI and Form CRS solution, et cetera. That's all part of the core solution. What we've realized over time, and a couple of years ago made some acquisitions, and you can see as the bookends at the top, we've got our Precise FP solution that many of you are familiar with. And if you aren't, you should be, but we're not here to talk about that today. But it's a very modern and an easier way to collect data from the very beginning and get it in and share it with other solutions. And then on the other end, the bookend on the other end is really what we are going to talk about today: surveillance, compliance, and also compensation. Those just happen to be in the same platform that we have now integrated into the overarching platform of Docupace that we call the Docupace platform. Now, there are inherent advantages to being in a platform and also having a platform. And I think it's critical that we identify how the solution that we're talking about today, which is our surveillance solution, was architected and why it was architected in this way. It is its own standalone architecture that has obviously inherited the architecture of our overarching platform, but it can be used alone, as many of our solutions can, although they can also obviously be a part of the overarching platform as well. You're going to hear the word platform a lot today. So with that, I would like to have Bob kind of describe for us, how the solution of surveillance compliance was architected from day one. I think it's important as a starting point.
Yeah, it's probably relevant from a background standpoint. One of the things to note is that we really started in the compensation space. If you go all the way back to when we set out to do things, I had worked for the company that's currently Accenture, putting in SAP for about 17 years, and I saw how difficult it was to be successful. And the Wall Street Journal even came out with an article that said putting SAP in is like a root canal for a company. I had a vision of being able to do something a lot quicker, simpler, and faster that was native to the internet, right? So I'd seen a lot of tools out there in compensation and surveillance that had been kind of, replatformed or adapted to work in the cloud space, and they didn't really work very well, and they had inherent limitations that actually held them back. We found them to be brittle, and we found them to be expensive to implement, and we found them to be slow and not responsive to the regulatory environment, which is really dynamic. So we set out to do something that was a little bit different. We decided we would build a tool from the ground up that was designed to work in the cloud. We started with data, right? One of the key philosophies, we're going to probably talk a lot about data and a lot about platform today. The two are tightly integrated. But one of the key philosophies is you're really only as good as your data, right? There are lots of tools you can purchase and implement for various aspects of compliance, but if you don't have accurate information or if you don't have complete information, it's very hard to work with them and to make the right decisions. So we built a standalone data integration module. Initially, it was just to run compensation, but our clients approached us and said, hey, would you feed some of these third-party tools, because we can't get good data into our third-party surveillance tools. And we started doing that, and we saw how difficult it was. And at some point, around 8 or 9 years ago, we said, you know what, let's build our own tool. We think we can do this better. So that was the genesis from where we came. The key thing to know on the technology side is because it's native to the internet, it is fully multi-tenant and fully cloud-based. Why you care, because those are just fancy tech words, is that because it's fully multi-tenant, we gather the best information, the best practices that our clients use throughout the country, and we automatically make them available to all clients. So we put, they're called alert types in our software. We have 48 of them. We started out with 6 to 11 of them. They've grown over time, and every time we add a new one, all the clients automatically enhance it. Secondly, highly configurable. So the idea is for you to be able to solve your own problems with the tool. You don't have to call a vendor or rely on us to do something and run through testing, etc. The name of the game is to give you something that's rapid and agile. And then finally, the third thing that we've done by making this native to the cloud is given it universal availability across all the applications, wherever you are, if you're on the road, etc. Under a secure platform, you can get to your data, you can do your job, and it's highly scalable. right? So if we need to throw 15 more servers, we can just do that.
That's
So that was
fantastic.
kind of the genesis for why we did what we did, and that's kind of where we are right now.
That's a great tee up, Bob. Thank you. I want to double click on just two things before we move forward to kind of a deeper discussion or a deeper dive in the data. But first, you used a term that I think is really interesting, and that was fragile. Kind of brittle rather was the word. I was thinking fragile, but brittle was the word. Can you describe that just a little bit and kind of why you use that term?
We've had a couple of clients where we've had to feed third-party tools, and what we found was if there was any exception in the actual files that we were sending to those third-party tools, by the way, they required like 30 different files,
Right. Yeah.
it would fail. The whole, not just that one record would fail, but the whole job stream would stop. There would be a phone call in the middle of the night, and then we would have to back up and start over from the beginning. It was not resilient. It could not handle, a new relationship for a producer in the field, right? If it hadn't been predefined, it just gave up. And those are the kinds of things that you find when you're working with systems that started life on a mainframe 30 years ago, made their way into client server, and then sort of adapted themselves into the cloud. They work, but they only work when everything is exactly right. So our goal here was to kind of set up something that was much more robust, that allowed our clients, I should say, to adapt them quickly to the needs that they might have.
Yeah, great. And also, if we can as well, and I know I'm just asking you a lot of questions, and we'll continue to do that.
Oh,
This is really interesting. But I think another thing that I'd like you to dig down into a little bit or help us understand better is multi-tenant. That means different things to different people. I think it mostly means the same thing to everyone, frankly. But when I think of it in terms of having the ability to configure on the same platform for multiple different companies that might be in the same ecosystem.
yeah.
We have broker dealer aggregators like Osaic and Cetera and Atria and others. If I've missed, I'm sorry. But in the RIA space, it's there's a handful that we could name as well that bring together a bunch of different companies that even those companies would have possibly some uniqueness that they want to have done from a surveillance perspective.
Yeah.
Can you
There's a
help us
lot of
understand how you guys solve for that? Because I think that's a major key differentiator.
So it's a good question. If you look at this sort of multi-tenant and this configurable issue, those are two sides of the same coin, right? So when we're talking multi-tenant, I'll make it very simple. What we are talking about is one copy of software. Nobody's on the wrong version, nobody's 3 versions back, etc. Everybody is on exactly the same software. It allows you to stay current with no effort on your part. So in the old model in software, back when people would install it on-prem, or even with some of the on-prem systems that got adapted into the cloud, you still had multiple versions of the software, and client X was on version 2 back, and client 1 was 1 back, etc. By putting everybody on the same software, we cut an enormous amount of cost and complexity and risk out of the equation. But the other side of that is you're all on the same software. It's got to behave differently for different clients because you've got different business models, broker dealers, independents, bank broker dealers, aggregators, RIAs, et cetera. They all have different risks and different needs. So to accommodate that, we added in a very powerful customization and configuration engine, right? That is all low code or really no code, so that end users can make the software behave the way it's supposed to. Simple things like getting the view of the data that you need. So you can go into the software and say, these are the columns I need, these are the filter criteria I need, boom, it's got it. It's going to have that on a user by user basis different, and it will remember them. More complex things where we'll allow you to extend the data model. So if there's a piece of information, say on a product, that you want to manage because it's a key risk factor for your business model, but other clients don't need it, we allow you to add that on the fly to the data model and manage it as if it were in the data model from the beginning. I don't want to get too technical, but the idea behind it was to have one copy of software, but make it configurable so that it could do the things that individual clients needed them to do. It could behave differently in the right, and getting that balance right was a key aspect of what we spent a lot of time on in terms of making the thing work.
That's fantastic. So, if I could summarize, it's architected in such a way that different entities inside of one overarching company can have their uniqueness, but it's really all the same code base, same
Yes.
management, same versions, etc. But then on top of that, there's this concept of no code, low code that you hit on, and I'm kind of putting the label to it as no code, low code. But it's the ability for them, without having to call a vendor, actually keep up with and make changes on their own. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is exactly what we have done. Right now, it currently requires some training and education. So we have an implementation group that works with people so they understand what all the little dials and switches are to make the software work the way needs to. We've also added like a starter kit. So it's not a clean slate when you start. Out of the box, you have 200 plus rules that just run for you, and you can turn them off and turn them on, et cetera, but it's totally under your control.
That's
So
great. That cues up a question that I'm going to ask you later, and thank you for that. But I'd love to get into the data. I think data is critical. Garbage in, garbage out. We've heard that our entire careers. It's very true, right? But there's a lot to do with data, many sources, many formats, etc. Can you walk us through that? And
yeah, it's
how
probably
you mentioned that you collect data. I think a lot of firms today collect that data themselves and feed a surveillance solution of whoever they have chosen. But I know that we do it differently. I'd love to kind of, I mean, drill down into that if you could describe
all
it
right.
for
So
us.
no, that's a good question. And Kristen, it might make sense to put up the little slide that shows the different data sources out here. So a couple of concepts when we talk data. The first thing is we wanted to connect to industry partners. So if you look in the sort of bottom of this big disk, the blue area down there where you see a census and Axos and Betterment, et cetera, these are industry partners that we have relationships with that we bring data in on a nightly basis for all of our clients. No one of our clients use them all, but you can pick and choose to get the sort of data from the custodians and the clearing brokers out there that you need, including direct sources in a variety of formats. So the first thing we wanted to do was be, if you will, broad. We wanted to pull data from as many different sources. Wherever your data is, we want to bring it in. Secondly, we want to be deep. If we're broad by handling multiple different providers, we also want to be deep. We want to bring all of the data in. So, when we started life as a compensation solution, frankly, the transactions really were super important. Product information and accounts and positions, not nearly so much. Now that stuff's critical, especially for compliance. Compliance has by far and away the deepest and most complex data requirements of any of the applications we work with. Third thing I want to mention with is you'll see that you've got this big disk in the bottom and it's feeding multiple entities out there. So it says advanced compensation, surveillance and risk mitigation, license checking, et cetera. The idea is to bring the data in and bring it in once, right? A single source of truth for a financial services company. What we see so often out there is that because this is a really difficult problem to solve, compliance has gone out and bought their own surveillance tool. Finance has gone out and bought their own compensation tool. Ops has got a third thing out there. And there's a fourth thing for executive information reporting. All of them are close to the same, but none of them are identical. Huge problem when you want to put the data together in two respects. One, you want to put the data together and get good executive decision making. But secondly, where a lot of our clients are moving is into a very agile API driven ability to have third party systems or their own custom portal reach into a database and serve up data to investors and producers in the field and other key stakeholders within the organization. If you've got four different sources of truth, where do they go? Do you want the compliance people going to the compliance data, the finance people to the finance? A producer has to get all of that information. So what it does is add a huge amount of friction. So the goal here was to have a single data source. Finally, the thing I want to talk about, and maybe it's worth talking about next a little bit, is this idea of platform. Now that we're part of Docupace, we're not just doing surveillance and compensation. We're doing new account opening. We're doing document repository. We have this tool Matt mentioned called Precise FP that does data gathering. All of that data gets shared with surveillance tool. So the idea behind this is for you to control your own data gathering so that you keep the information that you need. We can talk a little bit more about some of the things we've done to put the different tools together, but a very simple business case, a place that we started, was for direct account opening, we need good suitability information. And you do not get that from any of the direct data sources like DST and Dazzle, et cetera. So you can get that from Docupace's new account opening. We'll go ahead and feed the compensation and compliance database. So when you're doing trade surveillance, you've got good suitability information to know whether the trade's okay or to gauge the risk there. So data is critical. I neglected to mention a little box over on the right. We are connected to industry partners such as FINRA and NIPR because we do license checking as well. So we've got bidirectional interfaces there that pull data in and send it, et cetera, so that you've got your licensing and carrier appointments up to date on the insurance and the BD side.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. Not to kind of put things out there that we shouldn't, but I know that we have at least talked about something that's pretty unique to having a platform like we have with the new account opening platform and this, the surveillance and compensation, and that's the ability to not just do post-trade surveillance, but there's a possibility that we could eventually implement a pre-trade surveillance capability as well, so that we would know even before we submitted paperwork that it was in fact compliant.
Yes.
I don't know if there's anything that you can share about that or not. I don't want to, get over our skis a little bit here, but
No, that's
I think that's a
okay.
really cool aspect of kind of what you described.
It weaves together a couple of things. One is because we have really good data, we can use it in a variety of spots. It doesn't just have to be in post-trade surveillance. We can use it for pre-trade surveillance. We can use it for license checking. We can use it for OFAC and FinCEN, et cetera. We are building a pre-trade surveillance check now as we speak. There's a couple, it's a little bit like the Transcontinental Railroad. We got some people from California working their way to the center of the country. We're in New Jersey here. We're working west, if you will. But the new account opening and the compliance aspect will meet in the middle, and I expect that to happen in the first or second quarter of next year. The idea is to be able to push the industry a little bit to give them some new capabilities for complex products. Doesn't make sense if you're buying, 100 shares of Microsoft, but it might make sense or add significant value when we're looking at annuities and alts and some of the other things out there.
Yeah.
The idea is to give the producers out there, here's some potholes you're going to fall into. You're going to get asked about this. You might want to paper this correctly before you send it upstream to principal approval.
Yeah, that's great. Well, there's two additional things that I want to bring up. One is, how do we help companies keep up with the ever-changing and dynamic kind of evolution of requirements that continue to evolve? That's number one. How do we do that? And help us describe that for us, if you would.
The idea,
how would a user of the solution do that, and how do we help them?
So a couple of things I want to share with you. I'll leave you with an idea of, we're kind of crowdsourcing, if you want to think of it that way. We have a single version of the software that we have some of the smartest and best compliance people in the country working on. We are sharing best practices back and forth, and it's kind of a rich set of sharing, which is that we're taking the best practices and baking them into the software. We are, of course, reading the information that comes from FINRA and the SEC about what they're focused on, and we're trying to make sure that we're ready for that. So there's some proactive stuff that's being done at the Docupace level to make sure that our clients have the tools that they need when the regulators come and they want to know about BI or breakpoints and that sort of thing. But we get some of the best information from our highly capable CCOs and heads of supervision out there that are saying, look, I really need this. It's not uncommon for us to get a call that says, look, I've got FINRA coming in a week and a half, and I need to be, they've asked about this, and this. What can you do, Bob? Right? And so we'll work with them on that aspect. And then if we hear the same thing more than once, we're going to say, I'm going to put a button out there. Just press this button. You should be able to get what you need. So the idea in terms of keeping current, it's all possible because we're fully multi-tenant, right? And information is shared by default. If you need to keep stuff private, that can be done too, but we want the default to be able to share best practices across companies.
That's great. So someone in their own environment, do they have to rely on us at Docupace to push them out the updates, or how does that whole updating when there are when regulations necessitate a change, how does that work?
There's two kinds of changes out there. So if there are a new set of risks that need to be managed and they kind of fit into the risk patterns that we've got already, and I haven't talked a lot about risk patterns, we call them alert types. We'll just give you counsel, like you need to add a couple lines to a table that will give you the kind of, if you're looking at a new kind of switch, here's how you set this up. You don't need any code. You don't really need us, but in reality, a lot of times people will call us. We meet with people regularly to counsel them on how to do that.
Right.
If it's really new and we don't have a risk pattern for it, we'll build one and we'll deploy it out there. We'll let you know. And because we're multi-tenant, it's out there for everybody automatically. And then we'll give you a little counsel on what you need to do to make use of it. Not all clients use all risk patterns, but all of them use at least 50% of them, that sort of thing.
Oh,
In
I
terms of
love
your
this support.
release cycle, I didn't mean to skip that. We're doing releases monthly at this point. So you don't have to wait a long time to get things into production. We want to be responsive out there. As compliance is not a situation where you can let things wait.
Right. Well, I love the supported flexibility, meaning the customer, our clients, can make changes to rules themselves, this whole low code, no code environment, but that we're there for them along the way as well. I think that's fantastic. So one other thing that I want to hit on, and I think it's important, it's not necessarily specific to trade surveillance, but it is from the standpoint that it's one of the things that we do. I know that out there are a variety of different solutions. If you want to look at, someone that's front running, or kind of gifting, and those types of things. Those don't really fall under trade surveillance, but they're important. And many companies actually have a second and separate solution for that very thing. It's maybe even run out of a slightly different department or whatever the case may be. But we love the fact, or we love the concept of vendor consolidation. So tell us a little bit about, and I know that our solution has many things in it already in one same solution. Describe that for us, if you would. Help us understand that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it's probably worth talking a little bit about this idea of platform. So if I go back to the decision I had to make to get acquired by Docupace, it really came down to two things. One is I met the management team and I was sold. These guys were awesome people, super smart, super hardworking. I'm like, I want to be with them. But the second thing is we had a common vision, right? We wanted to be able to do something once and share it across the entire enterprise. And we did not, little Giacomo did not have a good answer in the workflow space and the document repository space, et cetera. And that's a huge, huge gap. And Docupace didn't have a good compliance and compensation. So the idea behind putting us together is that we're stronger together. And once we become part of one platform, you define a product once, it's available to everything. You define an employee once, they can, given the authorization, access any aspect of the solution portfolio that's out there. We have best in class data integration. We're making that available to new account opening and some of the other tools that are out there. Precise FP is going to gather information. That information can be shared with some of the core Docupace components like new account opening, and that can also be shared with a compliance platform. So there's tremendous synergies in having, we call it many in one. We're never going to do everything. That's too ambitious a goal. We want to do all the core things that make sense to be in one platform together. And by doing that, there's a couple of huge business benefits. One is you have a single source of truth. Right? So you no longer, well, this system says this and that system says that, and I got to reconcile the two. That's just friction that goes away. A second thing is you can run business processes that start in one application and finish in another. So a really simple example of that is for our clients that run surveillance, we can go ahead and risk rate a trade, and if the risk is above X number of points, we can hold the compensation automatically. We've talked a little bit about sharing data back and forth from new account opening into surveillance. we also have the ability to make document viewing available through the surveillance platform to see what's in the document repository. So it's not uncommon when there is a high risk trade, you need to investigate. You're going to look at all the trades, you're going to look at the account position, but you may actually want to see the account opening paperwork. Maybe there's something written on there that's relevant. Was it signed? Who signed it, right? Who are the beneficiaries? That sort of stuff could be on the paperwork. So the idea is to bring it all together and integrate it with a process engine across the top. So again, it's kind of techie, but what we saw was when we had a platform, it gave you consistency, it gave you efficiency, and it gave you the ability to link things in a way that really wasn't feasible when you had point solutions.
That's great. Well, and I love that concept of kind of structured and unstructured data that you just brought up. A discussion for another day. We can do a deep dive on that later. But anything that you would kind of summarize? I know we're kind of running up against time here, and we want to get to questions if there are any questions as well, and
Right.
then kind of close. But I really appreciate the time today, Bob, and thank you for the conversation and educating us about the space in general and specifically our solution. But
No, it's great. I'll just close with two ideas, right, which we've talked about already. The first is we will integrate your data for you, right? So as opposed to a lot of the other approaches where you've got to sort of take on the burden of loading files and dealing with they don't load, et cetera, we're going to take all that becomes a service. We do that automatically, if you will. And the second thing is we're part of a platform or an ecosystem where everything works together. As you said before, you don't have to buy all of it, right? It's modular, but if you accrete components over time, it will automatically work together. So one vendor, one neck to choke, you sometimes hear people say, that's us. So that's our take on trade surveillance and other surveillance aspects, because as you mentioned, we do account surveillance and employee surveillance and licensing appointments and data changes, et cetera. But that's what makes us, I guess,
Bob,
a little
and you do it all in the same platform, meaning you can just turn those on because they're already there. We don't have to deploy another solution, correct?
No, that's
Just
correct.
pointing
It's
out.
there.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I know that you're a busy person and have a lot on your plate. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us today. We have the slide up for questions. I don't see any questions in the question panel. If there are questions, if people want to ask a question, you can still do so. And in the meantime, I'll just queue up another page. For starters, if you do have questions and want to contact Docupace, we will send out for participants that signed up for the webinar. You will get a follow-up email from us with the recording, which is great. You can watch it again because we know you want to. Just kidding. But it's you can share it with others, obviously. But we will also you can respond to that email that goes to our marketing department, and we will make sure that in a very timely manner you will be reached out to by a representative of Docupace that can answer your questions. So we'd love to have you do that. Also, we have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and would love for you to do that. It's monthly, and it's just really chock full of great information industry-wise. And then we also have a blog that you are welcome to participate in as well. So you can sign up for both of those and kind of keep up to date on all things Docupace and really also kind of the industry in general. So with that, it looks like we still have no questions. So we will close the session for today. This installment of the series. Thank you for joining us, and Bob, once again, we really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Today.